travel and tourism to Topeka. For the benefit of the new members of this committee, let me give you a very basic understanding of the importance of the Transeint Guest Tax Fund and its impact on the economy of Topeka. For every dollar of Transeint guest tax that is raised as a result of an overnight stay in a hotel in Topeka, there is a corresponding approximately $1.25 raised in total sales tax revenue. I emphasize total. The city's portion of that you can do the math on. The investment of Transeint guest tax dollars should always be viewed as an investment in advancing the economic success of the city of Topeka. The two go hand in hand. More guest tax means more sales tax revenue, which ultimately pays the bills for the city, reduces property taxes, or otherwise assists the city in the city's success. It is with that understanding that the Topeka Lodging Association has for the last 6 or 8 years advocated for the wise investment of Transeint guest tax dollars. Use of Transeint guest tax dollars for anything that does not ultimately positively impact travel and tourism is only throwing money away. I have said for years that we need to think of this fund as our investment portfolio. I'm glad to hear the comments this morning by staff and committee members that I think we've turned the tide on that particular concept. That is how the concept of making improvements to the Sunflower Soccer Complex was derived. With that initial effort behind us, the Topeka Lodging Association membership is now coming forward with a new proposal to further advance the efforts of improving our city and further the concept of investing the Transeint guest tax wisely. Over the last 2 years, Visit Topeka has been involved in a major effort to rebrand our city. An integral part of that rebranding effort included the eventual design and development of a public plaza in the downtown corridor to coincide with the soon-to-be-completed Kansas Avenue redevelopment. The concept of this plaza has been presented to many civic groups since the study was completed last year. In an effort to advance the plaza concept, the Topeka Lodging Association today makes the following proposal to this committee. And I would add that what I'm going to cover here in the next couple of paragraphs was voted on about a month ago by the Lodging Association and received 100% unanimous support of the lodging community. TLA supports the renewal and extension of the existing 1% Transeint guest tax that is due to sunset on December 31st, 2015 for the purpose of dedicating the funds raised by that 1% to the following 2 purposes. Number 1, ongoing support of the historic preservation effort in Topeka to be capped at 20% of the funds raised by the extension of the tax. Number 2, the remaining 80% of the funds raised would be dedicated to the acquisition, design, and development of the public plaza in the Kansas Avenue downtown corridor as proposed by Roger Brooks in the branding effort that was completed in 2014. Number 3, this extension of the 1% Transeint guest tax would sunset on December 31st in the 7th year of its existence. Number 4, the Topeka Lodging Association's support of this extension is contingent upon the City Council of Topeka providing full support for the proposal in its entirety. It should be recognized that the intent of this proposal is to provide some impetus and immediate progress to the effort to develop a public plaza in downtown Topeka. Any deviation from the plan as outlined above will only jeopardize the end goal of securing the public plaza in a timely fashion. And the message there is that the public plaza needs to happen as soon as possible. And we feel like the effort to dedicate this 1% to that, we can effectively realize the completion of the public plaza in a time frame that will be provide some immediate benefit to travel and tourism in Topeka. While we recognize there are other worthy causes that may also benefit from the extension of this 1%, it is the feeling of the lodging community that the plaza will provide a huge asset to market additional travel and tourism within the city of Topeka that is not currently available. We also recognize that with the expiration of this existing 1%, which sunsets at the end of this year, the historic preservation effort would lose its primary source of funding. We do not want to see that happen. TLA recognizes the importance of historic preservation, and this proposal provides a level of funding that is fairly consistent with the current funding that is provided for the purpose of historic preservation. This is based on the current occupancy and average daily rate as they exist today within the hotel industry in Topeka. As we continue to increase both occupancy and average daily rate, the funds provided by this 1% will grow as well. This proposal provides the impetus needed at this point to begin the process of acquiring land, designing, and development of another tremendous asset to impact the economy in the city of Topeka. I want to just briefly touch on those two measurements that I mentioned, occupancy and average daily rate. Those are two things that the hotel industry lives and breathes. Our occupancy today consistently runs in the 55 to 60% range, which is unacceptable from an industry standpoint. As a result, the average daily rate is at a moderate level, and you have to keep in mind that as we increase demand for hotel rooms, both of those indexes will rise, both the occupancy and the ADR. So an investment today, Nikki has has provided in the 2016 budget that 1% is about $329,000. If we raise those two indexes, occupancy and average daily rate, then that 1%, you see what happens. We have more money to invest back into the community for the benefit of everybody involved. That is my comments. I will stand for any questions that you may have. And I'm going to grab my cup of coffee.
Are there any questions, committee members? Councilman Cohen?
Where is the proposed location of the plaza downtown?
Mr. Brooks, in his proposal, identified a key location, but I would tell you that currently we're looking at about 2 to 3 different possibilities for the public plaza. The one that was identified as being the most ideal, and you have to understand there's buildings and office space there now, is at 7th and Kansas. But we really want to try and find a way to acquire a piece of property that will provide the benefit to the downtown corridor, as Mr. Brooks identified in his plan. That doesn't mean it has to be at 7th and Kansas. We currently have at least 2 or 3 locations that we're looking at right now.
Councilman?
I'm familiar with the plan, so.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll go to the next one. And I told Beth Fager that I would let her speak early because she has a Riverfront Authority meeting, so we'll let her go next.
Thank you. I'm going to have that. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Good morning. I'm Beth Fager. I am the chair of the Topeka-Shawnee County Riverfront Authority, and also pretty closely associated with the Great Overland Station. So 2 entities that have been receiving the transient guest tax, for which we've been very grateful in the past. We don't have a formal proposal today, but we are here to talk a little bit about the benefit and the potential of riverfront development, which that park on the north side of the river represents. And I think really that Topeka's on the cusp of a moment in our history where we have an opportunity to really make some big changes. So, I would say that although the park has been receiving money for 12 years, actually, it doesn't look like anything's happened. However, most of the property for that park has been acquired. A master plan has been developed. And really, I think the project is ready to move towards the point that it's developing those construction drawings and ready for implementation very soon, in the near future. But a key element is to continue to provide funding for it. So I think this is a huge economic development investment in our city. The North Side Park is a catalyst to further development along the river, and all of that river development really brings together both sides through the main core of our city, the Noto Arts District, as well as the downtown. And I think bringing people to Topeka, visitors, it's going to be a place that people want to come. Water enthusiasts are going to want to come. And if we have this green space and we are relating our history, our Great Oregon Trail history there, it will be a draw, as well as just bringing Topeka residents down there. They come down, they spend money, they eat in restaurants, retail opportunities grow. So I think it's a great opportunity. I'm not going to say much more. I want to introduce Mr. Pat Downs. I believe you've all met Pat. He is the consultant to the Riverfront Authority. He has been working with Topeka. Even in the early days, he helped consult on the legislation that established the Riverfront Authority in 2006. I believe he is among the very top experts in community development and riverfront development in the nation. He is from Oklahoma City, very involved as a city staffer in developing their brickyard. Their historic brickyard district has since created his own consulting firm and been a real catalyst to Oklahoma City and their riverfront development. So I'll let him say a few words.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, committee and city manager, for the opportunity to present today. And I think there were some comments made earlier by my friend Kurt, and I think very appropriately that the notion of historic preservation is very important in terms of both retaining and attracting visitors. And I think what we'd like to see happen along the riverfront, particularly at this riverfront park location, is to capitalize on that by completing this park plan that had been promised to the voters here many, many years ago. It has the potential of not only serving some local development needs along the riverfront, it serves the growth and expansion of the Noto district, which is very, very important economically as well as culturally, I think, to the city of Topeka. It serves as an anchor to that entire area, but it also serves as a reminder of the Oregon Trail as it crossed through Topeka and actually crossed the Kansas River, the Kaw River, back in the day. And I think the notion of preserving that heritage, that history, and capitalizing on it, perhaps presenting it in a more aggressive manner, I think has the potential for some pretty significant visitor retention if it's properly handled. So it's not, I think, from our perspective, that one project would be better than another or more worthy than another. It's simply a matter of, I think, there's a project that's well underway on the river. Significant progress has been made. Property's been acquired. Master plans have been sketched out. And I think it would be a mistake to simply abandon it or to zero it in terms of potential funding, because I think there is the opportunity to help retain heads in beds. I served as the Director of Public Events in Oklahoma City for a number of years. That was including the convention center, the arena, AAA ballpark, and our performing arts center. So I know a little bit about the hospitality industry. I'm actually a member of the Oklahoma City Hotel Association. So I get the need to be sure that you're actually generating heads and beds, because that's what then feeds the kitty on this tax. So I think there's a real intelligence to what has been said earlier about the importance of that as a strategy. I simply think that this park has the potential as an urban development to do quite a bit more than what it might appear on the surface, because of the unique historic nature, because of its proximity to the No-Tow district in terms of strengthening that, and in terms of making a statement to North Topeka that their share of the tourism pie is equally important, I think. So those are things that I think, as you march forward in this process, I would simply invite that you consider that and look at that in terms of looking at the overall strategy for funding, strategy for implementation and development. The Riverfront Authority has made some pretty significant progress here in just the last year or two, partnering with the Greater Chamber, with the city, the county, to help bring some significant dollars to the community for redevelopment of your levee system. I think we stand ready to partner with you and with others in the community to help push this project forward that has maybe stalled out but hasn't died yet. And I think it's important to remember that the commitments that were made many years ago were made for a reason. They were valid at the time. They are certainly even more valid now, given some of the ancillary development that's taking place in and around the river corridor, and certainly in that very vibrant No-Tow area. If you have any questions or comments, be happy to address them.
Do you have any other communities that you know of where a similar project has been done and then would show some sort of evidence of economic development?
Well, riverfront parks are pretty popular throughout the country. And so, yes, I mean, ranging from San Antonio to Indianapolis to Denver, Colorado,
Do you
there
have
are many.
any cities that are comparable in size to ours that have undergone a project of this magnitude?
Well, older. There's a lot of communities of this size, and what we find is that those communities are returning to the river. What happened to the river here in Topeka is not at all unusual or unique. Most cities were formed on a river because having water is a very important ingredient for economic development. You can't have a community without a source of water. Typically, cities turned their back on their river. That became the pipe chase, the place where you had your landfills, your sewage treatment facilities. That tends to happen. So it became the backyard, place to kind of turn your back away from. I think in the contemporary era, and I would consider that dating back to the beginning of the rebirth of the San Antonio Riverwalk, many urban cities, whether they're large or small, are recapturing that riverfront and turning a liability into an asset. And I think that's the process that's ongoing here in Topeka. I think it's very smart what Topeka has decided to do with its river to take this very precious asset that has actually been recognized by the United States Department of the Interior as one of a handful of rivers in the entire United States that have been designated as a National River Trails river. And to do something with it that expands not only recreational opportunities for people here in the community in Greater Topeka and Shawnee County, but also to help provide that great infrastructure that attracts and retains the kinds of visitors, both in terms of convention and tourism, that this community deserves.
And one other question. Do we have a realistic budget for what it would actually take to get the project where it needs to be successful? I mean, like you guys had mentioned, we've been putting little bits of money here and there, and we could come up with an amount to get it going, but what's it take to really make it the economic asset that we truly need to get a return on our investment?
Well, what has been accrued over the period of time is certainly enough to buy the land and do some minimal improvements. I think probably another $1 million or $2 million would probably go a long way to help make that happen. And I also think that there is the opportunity to leverage local support for this against the possibility of private and governmental grants.
Okay.
That's something that the Riverfront Authority is very interested in and very aggressive with. The upstream weir that feeds your water treatment facility is one where we are going out and needs to be re-engineered anyway for safety. We are locating some grant monies that could, in fact, accelerate that process to the tune of high six figures with extra funding coming in. And I think with the unique historical nature of this Oregon Trails Park, I think there would be some great potential. In fact, Chairperson Fager has been in direct contact with an authority here in the state that seems to think there may be some possibility for that. So I think whatever we can do here in a local funding perspective, don't think that we're going to count that as the only possibility. I think we want to be as aggressive as possible to bring fresh dollars to the table to get it done right.
So to do it right, though, we're looking at $3 million, maybe even $5 million.
When
I know
you
it's
ask-
tough to come up with
Yeah.
my only thing is if we're going to do it, we should do it right. And so I don't want to go in saying, this is a $5 million project, but we're going to get it done for 1.2, and then no one's going to be happy with the result because we didn't invest the appropriate amount of money to make the project really work.
Let me just share
Please.
one comment. 2 weeks ago, there was a representative from the National Park Service with their Historic Trails Association, or not association, but program. And she's one who actually heads up the Oregon Trail program. And they are very, very interested in developing sites so that they are visitor-friendly, and the Park Service helps in that with signage and getting people there and the whole visitor experience. But they're very enthusiastic about this particular crossing site, the Pappins Ferry, and offered to do a design charrette where interested parties and stakeholders would come together and work with them and talk about creating that visitor experience that really is a draw. That is a free service. It would result in a really good updated design from what we originally had. And I think there might be some cost figures. Well, I know there would be some cost figures developed, and that would give us a much better idea of exactly what specifically should be done and how much that would cost. That could be done yet this year, actually. I believe we could he said it's hard to get on their list, but they would move us up because they consider it a high priority.
And there's no cost for that?
No, they come to the community and bring their team of landscape
I don't know why we
architects.
wouldn't want to do that then if
Free.
there's no cost. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that sounds great.
Yeah, it sounds great to me too, and I just learned about it in the last month. So,
Excellent.
but I think that's a real possibility and would get us quite a ways farther along the way. And we would need the help of the landowner, which I believe is still the city, to actually apply for that program and get on their list. But that has a lot of potential.
Sure.
And anything that is put in from the city, county, state, counts as match for anything for that federal money. And we have some National Water Trail money going in on some signage, and the state often provides a lot of money for the trail system, and that's, they'll be part of a trail system along the top of that levee. And there's some Corps of Engineers funding for that too. So, yeah, many other sources of funding. It would not be our community alone providing that.
Thank you, Beth. And again, if there are any further questions, be happy to address them.
Thank you, Pat. I think we owe you for getting the weir fixed with the Corps of Engineers in working on that effort. I know I attended the last Riverfront meeting, and when that was announced that that's going to go forward and levees are going to be fixed, that's the first step in getting our river developed. So we really appreciate all the effort as a consultant that you've done for Topeka. So
Thank
are
you.
there any other questions for, okay, thank you. And good luck with your meeting that you're going to.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Who would like to testify next? Do we want to go down this table, or you want to come up and testify? And I'm so sorry with names. I know all your names, and if you tell me your names, I am getting to that age. Jeff.
Thank you. My name's Jeff Carson. I'm here representing the historic Jayhawk Theater. It's kind of an exciting meeting. You start talking about entertainment plazas and riverfront parks, and I think the Jayhawk Theater is a really integral part of it. I know I've mentioned this before. We have a lot of momentum going right now for this 900-seat venue that I think is going to bring people to this city, put heads on beds, and it's going to be a great complement to TPAC, to the rest of the entertainment venues in this city. We're, of course, recent recipient of a $100,000 grant to put a marquee on the outside of the Jayhawk Walk on the 7th Street side, and that's the first step among many initiatives we're developing to make the project a lot more tangible and viable for this community. And I just want to urge you to keep that in mind as the process works forward, to help us in any way you can so that we can continue moving that project forward. And hopefully by the time the Kansas Avenue is completed, more other investment is made in downtown real estate. More people are focused on downtown, that our project will be rolling along right along with it. So I just want to advocate for that, and thank you very much. Any questions?
Jeff, there's a haunted tour in Topeka, and the gentleman that works out of the Kansas History Museum actually took us on the tour, and we stopped by the Jayhawk Theater, and there was a function going on in there, but it was really interesting that was on that tour. Do you know of any other groups that are including the Jayhawk, the state? And I also want to express I think it's commendable that it's called the State Theater because we're the state capital. So are there any other groups that are including, discussion about the Jayhawk Theater?
We are hosting many groups. We had the Fast Forward group there a few weeks ago for an after-hours sort of an event. The Downtown Rotary Club is meeting there in August, and we're making a lot of efforts to reach out to the community because we have a new story to tell. And the best way for us to get people excited about it is to get people in the door. And we have a big fundraising event June 12th, and we will roll out plans for the rest of the year and the futures.
Okay. Are there any questions of Jeff?
Real quick, just a disclaimer here. I sit on the Jayhawk Theater Board. Jeff, could you talk briefly about how we have a new reinvigorated board? We brought in a bunch of new people, and we're sort of getting prepared to relaunch the project, if you will.
Well, the board's been around for 20 years, and everybody's worked really hard to bring the project forward. It's been a very difficult time, and we've gone through a recruiting process. We've added 9 or 10 new board members, most under 40, and a few older folks, but really trying to involve people who are going to be consumers of entertainment. And I think that's one of the biggest changes we've made. We have a much more attractive project, I think, to younger Topeka, to retain and attract people to come here, to live here and work here, because this project is going to offer them, a place to go see live music and movies and things that they might have to go to Lawrence or Kansas City to enjoy right now. So when we get the doors open, I am certain that economic development of job retention, housing downtown, all the other attractions for people to invest downtown are just going to all improve along the way. You know, the downtown project is really an organism. I mean, it's housing and entertainment and restaurants and retail, and none of it really happens without the rest of it. So it's been an interesting thing to watch the last couple of years because everything is sort of, the tide has been rising really nicely, thanks to the city council for making the investment in the private $2.2 million that have been raised for the accoutrements down there. It's going to really work, and I think we're watching it evolve and develop. So I intend to help chart a course for the Jayhawk for the next couple of years to get it to get the doors open.
No questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, who else would like, Betty?
Hello, I am Betty Allen, and I am the president and COO of the Great Overland Station. And we have benefited from this Transeint guest tax and want to thank you for that. It has come to an end, or will come to an end the end of May. And the process of determining where the funds are going to go is going to be kind of exciting. A lot of people are interested in it. And I am here basically. The other side of my role is I am the chairperson of the Topeka Tourism Alliance. And a lot of people are not familiar with that, but I want to read what our mission statement is, and then I can talk more about this whole process. To educate the community by promoting local attractions and businesses through partnerships. The Topeka Tourism Alliance was formed to promote, sponsor, and encourage the development of the tourism industry in Topeka. The Alliance works closely with Visit Topeka to achieve these goals through education of the public about programs of tourism, recreational, educational, beautification, cultural, and economic development. A lot of words there and a lot of work. We have been in existence for over 10 years. It's been a struggle, but we all stick together and still try to promote each other. I'm talking about like all of the historical sites within Topeka are invited to be a part of this tourism alliance. And then we promote each other, and then we try to promote the attractions, other attractions within Topeka. The group has benefited very much so from the historical piece of the Transeint guest tax, the Curtis House, the Constitution Hall, the Ritchie House, and I have a list of more, but I'm not going to name them. So it's been very helpful to them to be able to have those funds to continue the restoration of the building, because the tax has been specifically not for marketing, not for anything else, it's to restore the buildings. And so that's been strictly followed, which has been very helpful and beneficial to all of these historical sites. So I like to see that continued. I would like to see, I don't have any numbers for sure, but I've been playing with them, the percentage being more than the 20% when you're looking at the numbers, because if it comes to like 80,000 or something, usually we have a lot more needs within the buildings and the structure. And so anyway, I'm for what Kurt is saying, because I think it's great to have the downtown, but I also need to make sure, as the chairperson supporting the tourism sites, that we, can still continue our funding for that. And also, the other piece I would like to talk about is the Riverfront Park in front of the Great Overland Station. It's been talked about a lot. We talk about it a lot when people are asking, what's going on with the grounds. The grounds have been purchased, and there's money in the fund. And I would really like to see the money is there, that it continues for the park, and I think there's some good argument for it. But I think it would be the greatest thing for Topeka that you have money put aside, this is what you're going to do, you have a plan and a process, and you're going to do it. Too many times we, not only as a city, but personally, we put ourselves on a budget, and then we need money over here for something else, and we take it over here and we play back and forth with it. So I have been promoting, the park and the funds, and so I hope that when you look at your percentages and determine how you're going to do it, that you will kind of consider that fund still going to the Riverfront Park. and then continuing and maybe doing them in conjunction with each other. Any questions?
Betty, I have one as far as the Tourism Alliance, and that is, and I can kind of present first that I went up to the Capitol steps. I walked the 296 steps up to the top and was out and around under the Native Americans on top. And there were about 3 couples up there that were from other states. And of course, we could see things from up there that they didn't even know about. The old Prairie Town, the flags at Overland Station. And, you know, I talked to them and said, you need to go see these things before you leave Topeka. And they indicated that there was nothing at the Capitol, and a lot of people come to see the Dome. I mean, we're the state capitol. There was nothing there that really had, a piece of paper that they could pick up and say, well, now you need to go here, you need to go there, that type of thing. Has the state ever had something like that in Topeka, this is what you need to visit, or, whether it's Visit Topeka or the Tourism Alliance, that we would have something that indicated to a tourist, whether they stopped at the zoo first, or the Ward Mead Old Prairie Town, or the Overland Station, that we would have something that indicated these are the sites you need to see in Topeka. Has that ever been done?
Yes.
And is it, why didn't they know about it?
Well, that's interesting. The Visit Topeka has been very good as far as promoting the historical sites. There's maps. A lot of the locations has maps of the city of Topeka and all the different locations of everything. But when they're all listed of different things and they're all different places, I think when you go into a city, you get a little confused. And the best way to hear about these is by verbal, just like you telling them about it. You'd be amazed the people that did not know here in Topeka about the Great Overland Station. I know the flags. I had no idea anything was going on in the building. The same thing goes for Old Prairie Town, Ward Mead. They're tucked over there in a corner, and you go down 2nd Street and think, oh, these are all houses. Better turn around and go away. Ritchie House, it's kind of off the beaten path, but it's got tons of history. The Tourism Alliance struggles with getting it promoted. We do not have a lot of marketing dollars. We have very little marketing dollars. We have small staff. And when I say we, not just us, a lot of us have small staff. That's our biggest struggle, is to get marketing and get it out. A lot of it's word of mouth. When they come to the station, we talk to people about all the places around. Combat Air Museum gets forgotten. It's clear out south. So trying to collectively, city-wise, figure out how we could promote it and support the different organizations, but as a group. See, nobody knows what Topeka Tourism Alliance is. And so they're like, what is it? Who is it? And if we could try to get it to where they know who is a part of the tourism groups, then they would be able to see the different sites and the locations. So marketing dollars are tough for all of us. But Visit Topeka, we have new leadership. And Brett is very excited about making some changes and things like that. So we're looking forward to working with him, and the organization is too. Yes.
Jensen?
Quick question, and if you don't know, it's okay. Any idea how many folks, all the historical sites that are part of the Tourism Alliance bring to Topeka?
That are part of the Tourism Alliance, or historical sites as a whole?
Well, let's go as a whole.
I think Brett might have a better idea.
Okay.
I know a lot of the sites that have attractions and different events, like weddings and things like that. Yes, we have a lot of weddings. They stay at different places.
Sure.
But if they weren't having the wedding at our house, our place, I feel like it's my home. In Topeka, they'd be going to another hotel.
Right.
But trying to get more events and things like that is like the Railroad Festival and Combat Air Museum has several events out there. I don't know the number amounts. I don't know.
Okay. Well, and
hotel
it's difficult to
folks would
track.
probably know.
One of the questions we always have is, does this import money into the community? And, you know, if it's people from Topeka going to look at these things, that's wonderful, but it's just moving money around as if it's a guest that comes in from outside the community, just like the folks that were here from out of town to go to the top of the Capitol, then that's bringing money into the community that we didn't have. And that's real important when we look in terms of the investments we make. If we're investing to move our own money around, well, I mean, that's good, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, but
We need people from the outside coming in.
yes, and that's how we're going to grow our
And
community.
every time we have visitors, I try to get my folks to ask questions because I like to visit with them. I want to find out how they found out about us. And we get a lot of people from over other countries, and it's like, how did you find out about us? It was either through the internet or it was through a travel magazine.
Cool.
So that's encouraging to know it's coming from there. Then I ask, you know, the other question I ask after we're talking is, where else are you going in Topeka? And sometimes it's, well, you know, we were just going through, well, we've got sites on the way, the History Museum, we've got Ward Mead and all of that, and the zoo. So just trying to ask them a lot of questions and then figuring out where do we need to reach out. A lot of bus tours come through, they come through and they're gone. And they get to see several of the sites, but they don't get to see all the sites. You know, and so trying to get them to want to come back. Hey, you guys, we were on a bus tour. We're going through Topeka. There's a lot of things to see. The other thing is Kansas City has a lot of events, a lot of activity and everything. You got Salina that has a lot of stuff going on. You got Manhattan. Where's Topeka? We're right here. Where are they going? They're zooming right through the highway.
Yeah.
So just trying to come up with more activities, get it noticed. You know, billboards are good, but get the word out so that we get excited. People in Topeka start seeing. A lot of people haven't been to things here in Topeka. And get them excited. Then they will have their family come, or let's have a family reunion in Topeka. Well, why would we go to Topeka? Because
Yeah.
we got this and that. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you,
Any other
Betty.
questions?
I really believe that that is part of the effort, that we have to get families, we have to get Topeka people.
That's right.
As was the consultant with the JETO, that we are our own worst cheerleaders, and we need to get the word out. And I've seen it work, that even though we're close to Kansas City and we're close to Salina, I know Suki down at Bose has gotten bands that are going through to stop in Topeka and play here. Roger knows that too. And I think we
Yeah.
can take advantage of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
And I also want to speak to the Jayhawk Theater. They have benefited from some of the funds in that. We have somebody that's representing the Jayhawk Theater, I think, at our tours and meetings now, because I want to make sure they're a part of this whole group that we're trying to cooperate and put together. Thank you.
Okay. Who would like to speak next? John?
Good morning. John Hunter, Executive Director of Heartland Visioning. Heartland Visioning is a convening organization. By that I mean we go out and we engage the public. We try to find out what their interests are in promotion of the city, the projects that they want to support, the vision that they have for the city of Topeka. We bring that information back to our management committee. Priorities are set. We then take that information to our steering committee, break these priorities down into working teams, and then begin working on these projects, and then do everything possible to communicate back to the citizens as to the efforts that are being made. So it's a very holistic approach to moving the city forward. I have the pleasure, if you will, of being the middle guy here in the discussion today. I serve on a committee with Visit Topeka, and so I'm well aware of the plaza development. We support that entirely. We have a team, a network team, that Mayor Wolgast is head of, and it's called the Dynamic Core. And every month, the mayor sits down and meets with leaders who are covering projects from South 10th all the way up through Gordon on the north. So that encompasses Noto, Great Overland Station, Riverfront Development, Riverfront Park, and downtown. All of the projects that are going on, we are discussing, we are looking at ways to support to carry the information forward out to the citizens. The Jayhawk Theater, Jeff Carson, serves with us on that, and he's also on our entertainment committee. So we really try to touch all bases through that dynamic core. So what we have is the support of the plaza downtown, but then on the other hand, we also have the support for the Riverfront Park. We do understand the history. We look at it, again, I want to use that word, holistic view of things. And so we try to fight this concept of the creation of silos, where one group wants this, one group wants that, when in reality, we want to break those down. We want to form partnerships and collaborations in this city to move it together. We think that there is a bigger view, and sometimes, yes, it takes more resources, sometimes it takes a little more time and effort to bring all of the coalitions together to work in a singular direction. But we view the dynamic core as one large project that will truly change the dynamics of this city for the future. So we look at the development of downtown as absolutely essential. But we balance that with what's happening with the riverfront, the repairs of the levees, and the opportunities that will come with changing the top of the levees so we'll have walking and bikeway paths. The development of that riverfront park, that goes all the way back to 2003. People had a vision. They created a rendering. They already established some funding to get that going. This is no time to stop that. And who would have believed what happened up in Noto? Noto is a pure project that came out of the Heartland Visioning process. And here we are today, over 30 businesses up there producing tax dollars for the city. And 1,500 to 2,000 people on a good first Friday night, really enjoying an area of town that 5-6 years ago was a derelict area. If we can do what we did in North Topeka, if we can do that right across the board and have a wonderful riverfront park with a key component being the Great Overland Station, if we can have people really enjoying the river again, and then have a refurbished downtown, we bring that all together. You talk about heads on beds. There's no question that working with Visit Topeka and the tourism that can come from recreational activities on the river, a park right next to the river. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to take that fly-off that goes down to the Great Overland Station, and if you look to the left, you can now see the river. And that's because, thanks to Jim Colson and his crew, we were able to negotiate a deal to have the trees trimmed. Thank you very much, City Manager. And you can see the river for the first time. You can actually see the Capitol for the first time. And you can begin to see what that view would be like for people who are having picnics and activities over there on a park. I mean, it's just absolutely a game changer once you start bringing these things together. Now, I don't think many of us would have been here today had the Appropriations Committee not listed the Topeka project as number 2 in the nation. Talking with Pat 3 months ago, he would have said to me, well, maybe by 2018, 2019, maybe they'll get it started. Ba-boom, all of a sudden we're number 2. Now they're going to let the bids in August. Now they're going to provide additional funding in October. Our whole time frame that we were talking about with Heartland Visioning has just been foreshortened. And we're going, well, if we can get the riverfront done, well, then maybe we better get that park going, get that downtown finished off. Let's take, in the next couple of years, 2 to 3 years, let's make a concerted effort to move together as a city. Bring all of these projects together, move them forward financially. Yes, it's a commitment. And yes, we know there's sensitivity to bonding issues, et cetera. But I would argue that the citizens of Topeka, the people that we engage with, they want this to happen. There is ongoing support. I am doing 3-4 meetings per month. Later on today, over the noon hour, I'll be talking with the 20s 30 Club out at the Country Club. And I'll be telling them about the projects that are being initiated and the changes that are coming. And I can guarantee you, we have buy-in from the public right now if we keep these projects going. If we do one first and then the other, if we provide some funding and space it out over 5 to 7 years and then pick up the next one, I will tell you the efforts that are being made right now will die. People want results. They want things to happen. They're seeing things happening right now. And if you spread them out, spread them out, spread them out, for organizations like ours, it's incredibly difficult then to maintain the involvement of these wonderful visionary volunteers. And that provides social capital to you as a community, as a city. Those people are offering their times, and we're talking about a substantial group of people who represent many, many organizations across this community. And they're meeting at 7:30 on a Friday morning. For what purpose? To do something for their community, to respond to the concerns of the community. So again, I'm really privileged to head this organization, and I support everything that is being said about this plaza development. It is extremely important for the overall plan for downtown. But at the same time, I completely support the continued development of the park plan as it relates to the riverfront. Somebody said to me just a week or so ago, you have to remember that back before the 1951 flood, people in Topeka enjoyed the river. They enjoyed the river. There were all sorts of activities. You can go back and read accounts. There were river boatings, there were fairs, et cetera, because why? It didn't look like a drainage ditch is why. It was a natural running river. Now true, the flood came along in '51 and the Army Corps did a great job. They built a levee system that would get the water out of here as quickly as possible. Well, the end result of that is we end up with more sandbars and bushes growing in the middle of our river than we do have any type of river flowing in there. So we can get back to a time of '51, and this time in a safe way with the new levee system. Put in that weir. We can make it look like a lake between the two bridges. We can have recreational activities that we have not even thought about how we can bring that in terms of economic dollars and, again, advancement of tourism activities. The things that are being talked about right now are substantial. I think the timing is absolutely correct and so significant that I urge you that as you think about the funding here, that you keep in mind the total project concept, the total visioning process for the city, and that both of these projects are extremely worthy of financial support. I'd encourage you to do everything possible to try to keep them moving forward together in a collective way rather than creating different silos that end up in conflict with each other. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, John, I have a
Yes.
couple that I want to ask you, and then I'll let the other council members also ask. Since this is a development of a park, have you been to including the Parks and Rec from the county, John Knight, and all of them in the discussion of the Riverfront Park?
Oh, yes. I meet with John regularly. John also shows up on our steering committees on those Friday mornings. He's there, and a number of people from Parks and Recreation sit on what we call the Parks and Recreation Priority
List.
team.
Okay.
So, yeah, well represented in all of this. Yeah, and John and I have been over there. We have tromped along the grounds. We've walked the levees. Yes,
Okay.
very much.
My second question has to do with philanthropic. I know we had the George and East Gray, dedication. We have Hummer Park. We have several different things in Topeka that are listed after important, officials or people that were here. And as with the George and East Gray, I think one of the attorneys that was involved in that said that they wish they could have created an endowment fund to continue the upkeep of that. So does Heartland Visioning have any effort towards going after philanthropic funding for sites in Topeka?
Yeah, that's really not our role. Obviously, I do funding in order to keep the organization.
Whose role would that be?
Going.
Whose role would that be to go after, for the city to go after philanthropic dedication of buildings and that type of thing?
That's a good question. In fact, a parallel question to that is, who is going to oversee both the plaza downtown and the park? Who's going to run the operations? Who's going to do the maintenance in the future? And I would argue this is the perfect time, again, not to set one against the other, but to bring the two together, sit them down in a collaborative way, form the right committee that will address both the city issues, the county issues, because we've got to keep in mind, you're talking about parks are under county. Let's get the right people around the table to figure these things out, see how we can approach moving these projects forward, but then at the same time, have the right committee that can be, again, addressing exactly how do you keep these things funded in the future. But again, our role is let's get the people around the table and that.
And that would lead to my final question. We are the state capital. I've been to a lot of state capitals. My husband was the judicial administrator for the state for 30-some years, and I've visited probably all of them except for 5. And I know that state capitals are cities where the city and the state work together to try to build tourism and that type of thing. Are we working with the state Department of Commerce and Tourism, you know, whatever their title is now? Are we working with the state to make our state capital a city and state entity?
I would say the best association is probably through the Riverfront Authority. In fact, we'll be having a meeting later on today with Secretary Jennison. That really is the main connection right now. Heartland Visioning really does not have a connection with the state. We're concerned about city-county right now in terms of the establishment of the priorities that we deal with. But that relationship is something that absolutely needs to be built in, and I think Visit Topeka has an opportunity to look at the tourism that goes on with the state capital by bringing busloads of people in and then getting them into the restaurants and shopping areas in our community. So, it's just another thing we have to keep working on.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Brett, we haven't heard from Visit Topeka. Do you want to come up next?
I do.
More paperwork.
More handouts.
Hooray!
This
Yeah.
one's shorter.
Thank you.
Brett, you keep giving us pie charts without pie.
So I sat back quietly, and I just wanted to hear what everybody had to say. And from a Visit Topeka standpoint, the most exciting thing for us is that 4 different people talked about 4 different things going on in the city that they're passionate about and that they're working towards improving and implementing. And all 4 of those are going to be added to our arsenal of Visit Topeka to be able to help sell the city and bring more people into town. So it's very exciting that there's that many different people doing this many different things. I'll make my comments pretty short because I've talked to all of you, but they're a little more specific in a lot of ways. Essentially, we're talking about the budget in general. Our number 1 goal at Visit Topeka is to maximize every dollar that we are allocated. A lot of people have touched on that already. How can we get $1 and we can bring back in $2 or $3? And that's what I'm looking at on a daily basis with the money that we are given for our budget. How can I bring more money in? So we'll just kind of start at the top of the 3 bullet points there that I handed out to you. We're requesting a percentage-based contract of 78% of the 5% designated for the city and VTI that can increase or decrease depending on the amount of transit guest tax collections. This allows Visit Topeka more money to use to bring in quality events if we surpass our budget, but also protects the city if the collections are not what we thought they would be. So I've talked to each one of you, rather than doing a flat dollar amount, I would look for a percentage-based amount through the contract. As a way to maximize the dollars we spend, we're also requesting a 3-year contract with the city. This allows my sales staff to be able to utilize all money allocated to the bid fund during a year, rather than having to hold money back due to promises of payment to events booked in the future. This would be events like the Kansas Kids Wrestling that we have promised money in the future years. We're not allowed to or able to spend all the dollars that we have for a specific year because we need to make sure that we have enough money for them for 2017 or 2018. The bid fund is a proven tool to bring more events to Topeka, as well as an increase in the overall tax base. We are not requesting an increase to our operating budget right now. We are requesting that you reduce the amount of money going to the general fund from 12% to 6%. Of that 6%, we are requesting that 2% of that be added to the 10% currently that is going towards the bid fund, which is roughly that $175,000. This allows more money to be used to attract new events to town, as well as to retain events like USA Kansas Kids Wrestling, Sunflower State Games, and others. Again, this bid fund has been shown in the last 3 years to bring back $2 and sometimes $3 for every $1 we have been given. To put money into the bid fund is to invest in our future. It is literally an investment. I've shown each of you the charts and the graphs. The remaining 4% will go towards the creation of a development fund. This fund will be used as seed money to help people in the local community create new quality events that will generate overnight stays and spending in the community. This money will be given out after an extensive application is filled out by the individual with an explanation of the use of funds and how it will increase tourism and spending in the local community. That money would be roughly $50,000 to $70,000, depending on how much money we're bringing in. And I've talked to each one of you about that, but that would essentially be used for a group that's wanting to create a new event that we would be able to assist them. Finally, Visit Topeka supports the extension of the 1% transient guest tax for tourism development. Wichita just recently, last year, passed a 2.75% tourism tax that will generate on its own an additional $2.5 million to $3 million a year for the sole purpose of marketing the city to conventions and events. This 1% tax extension would keep us at the 7%. And by comparison, Wichita is currently at 8.75%, and Kansas City and Overland Park are at 9%. We would look at those two cities, those three cities, as our biggest competition. Every speaker here had a great point about what they wanted, and it is all tourism development. It's all things that will help bring more business to town. So what I look to you for is to do what you think needs to be done for us to make the biggest impact on tourism, and that would be to allow us to have more of that money to be able to use to go find other quality events and larger events to bring to town, because those events will increase the tax base. Anybody have any questions?
Brett, just for the benefit of, those in the audience and even in the TV audience, if you're going to increase 2% to the bid fund, where would you get that 2%?
That would come from the general fund.
The general fund.
There's currently 6% of there's currently 12% of the 5% slated for the city and Visit Topeka's budget. And I would look to take 2 of that % to add on to the bid fund.
So you're just reallocating existing money?
Existing money, yes. Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you. I know we haven't heard from Constitution Hall. Chris, do you want to come up and make any public comments about the budget?
Thank you, council members. Yes, I'm not specifically representing Constitution Hall today or any other group, but I realize I'm very much associated with those efforts. I would like for you all to consider that in 2003, when the current ordinance was instated, the effort was to find funds in the 1% left over from the Great Overland Station collection, was to find funds for historical heritage tourism development. And the recognition at that time was, okay, there are plenty of historic preservation funds. There are plenty of private organizations, private institutions that contribute to historic preservation. But historical heritage sites usually are on the losing end. They just don't have the kinds of funds that are necessary. So in the interim, from 2003 to 2006, there were several changes change in form of city government, several changes in administrations, and through no one's fault, I think some of that original intent has been lost. And so I would hope that this committee would encourage the administration and volunteers in the community and the owners of historic sites specifically to better work together. I think there is an opportunity to better work together. I'd also like to call your attention to the Capital Journal has featured a one-year series of monthly articles on heritage tourism, particularly relating to Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area. That is significant. What is most important, we've learned from the National Park Service and from the tourism industry, is that it's very important to have authentic historic sites for people to visit. People want to not just know the story of the Oregon Trail, they want to visit a place associated with it, such as the park proposal. There are articles in the collection of the Historical Society that over 1,000 people, over 1,000 wagon trains passed in front of Constitution Hall in 1858. So these are places that we hope visit Topeka, and through the other tourism alliances, we can begin to market this story with authentic places. So thank you very much.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else? Kurt, you want to?
I just have a question.
Okay.
That probably more for Brendan or City Manager Colson. We've been talking a lot this morning about renewing the 1% that's due to sunset. I believe there's a time frame that action would have to be taken on that in order for us not to create a gap between the time that it expires and the time that we get it initiated again. So does anybody know the answer to that question?
I can speak to that.
Go ahead.
Yes, you're correct. The charter ordinance has a 60-day protest period. So ideally, if the council chooses to continue it, the charter ordinance should be passed probably mid-September. Has to be published twice in the newspaper, and then there's a 60-day protest period. So ideally, maybe mid-September to pass the ordinance.
We need to schedule a meeting then or before then?
Well, I depending upon what this committee does, you would recommend continuation of the charter ordinance, and then a charter ordinance would be drafted and considered by the governing body sometime before mid-September.
So do we need to entertain a motion today to extend it?
Well, not necessarily today, but at some point because of the time consideration. The earlier the better.
Okay.
And let me ask this, do we have to have the allocation schedule worked out to go in that ordinance, or can we just say we're going to extend the half-cent or the 1 cent tax and then work out what we do with it?
The latter,
Okay.
yes. The details don't need to be worked out. You just
And
need to get the funding.
What would
mechanism.
happen if we said 2%? Are we stuck with renewing what we have, or can we entertain adding another
Of
percent?
course, you could, yes, entertain whatever you want, yeah, and that would be a recommendation to the full governing body, which would ultimately
Right.
decide.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We
That
would
answers
probably want to, if there is a recommendation of a difference, we would want to have the Lodging Association visit Topeka, because is that not how you were involved with the
Yes.
2006? Your recommendation or support?
Well, I only ask that, you know, if our closest competition is going to spend way more money than we are, we're going to be at a competitive disadvantage, and I would be concerned that any effort we put in would almost be moot because, you know, again, we don't have enough oomph to get where we need to go.
I just want to, again, applaud the efforts that have gone on for the last 6, 8, 10 years in the transition that's taken place in the thought process in the use of the Transeint guest tax dollars. I applaud the efforts of everybody that's been here this morning and you all as a committee as you consider the wise investment of those funds. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll move. Is there anyone else that would like public comment to speak? Okay. We'll move on then to the discuss Sunflower Soccer Association 1% allocation. And Brendan?
A little handout that's going to go around. So the Sunflower Soccer Association, the 1% that was approved in 2012, it went into effect at the 1st of January of 2013. Those were approved for certain projects. So those certain projects we're getting final cost on now. And last night, the governing body set a public hearing as of June 9th to start the process to levy those special assessments onto the Sunflower Soccer Association tax roll. So we're starting to go through that process. And I'll walk through this sheet. So you can see at the top, there's 2 projects that were approved. The first one was for a restroom concession. I think some parking lot improvements, field improvements out there. And then the second project is the sanitary sewer. So those 2 projects are complete. We're estimating $3.5 million for final cost. As of at the end of 2014, we had approximately $500 and some thousand in cash that had accumulated to date in the fund. So at the end of 2014, we transferred that money, that $500,000, to the project account. So basically paying cash down, which will require less bonding. So the bonding needs, as it currently stands, is about $3 million. Add a couple % on for bonding costs, so about $3.1 million overall. So that $3 million, I'm recommending that being spread over 12 years. So there's 17 years that's remaining on the tax until it sunsets. So basically in that box below there, I've just developed some estimates of what it could look like moving forward. So estimated revenues of $6.9 million. If we spread that $3 million over 12 years, that would be approximately $3.8 million over that 12 years. So instead of doing it over 12 compared to 17, we're saving about $400,000 in interest costs, which could be applied somewhere else in the community. So really what I'm getting to is that if you compare the estimated revenues to the annual debt service payments, which these are approximate at this time, there's going to be available revenues on top of what the debt service payments are going to be. So at this point, there's nothing as far as a resolution or anything that's been passed that those monies can be applied to, since the projects are being completed for Sunflower Soccer. So there's going to be available revenues. As you can see here, I'm estimated somewhere around $3.2 million over the next 17 years. So there, at some point there needs to be a decision also as to what those available funds will be done, what they'll be applied to.
And when do we need to make that decision?
That decision can be made honestly at any time. I don't think there's any rush or anything. I think it would take a simple resolution as to what those funds would be applied to moving forward.
Would it not be more prudent just to apply the excess to the principal and pay it down faster?
Councilmember Jensen, we could do that. I think what I tried to do with the recommendation of 12 years is to have a model that we have a debt service coverage in case there's anything that would come up, because based on the contractual agreement that the city has with Sunflower Soccer Association, any shortfall of the transient guest tax, because the city will actually be paying the special assessments on Sunflower Soccer Association's behalf. So any shortfall would have to be covered by Sunflower Soccer Association. So basically this model standard is basically like a 1.2 debt service coverage ratio. So this would meet that coverage ratio moving forward. So that's a fairly conservative practice to just ensure that there's available revenues to cover any debt service.
So this is what's left after we have a buffer then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there will also be some cash that will be accumulated throughout this year that could also assist with a buffer, or could also be applied somewhere else if the governing body so chooses.
At some point, could you run a model where we just try to pay the debt off?
In 10 years?
Well, I mean, just take your estimated excess revenue and just apply it to principal and see how that, if we can do that and save a ton of interest, then it seems to me that would be the more prudent move than to shovel. I mean, because these are not huge amounts of money, frankly, so.
Councilmember Jensen, just to clarify, so if you had if you took out a mortgage, you could go and you could apply extra principal payments
Sure.
to that. The way city bonding works is that we don't have that flexibility. Typically, we build in some type of call date for our bonds that would allow us to go in and pay everything off at a certain point in time. However, this would be packaged with other special assessment issues like Lawrence Bay. So in order to call those bonds, we'd have to pay everything off at one point in time, including the Lawrence Bay assessments. So we don't have as much flexibility.
So we don't have the
as-
ability to pay them off or release what you're
Yeah.
telling me. Lovely.
And that's because it's municipal bonds that people buy and or invest in.
Yeah,
So
so-
that's the,
Councilman Short, so we have investors, and
Right.
those investors like that guaranteed rate of return over,
right.
the next 12, 20 years, however we structure this. So they want that payback, and so that's why we don't have that flexibility to pay down that.
Are we limited to what we can do with this excess revenue then?
You're, Councilman Jensen, you're not limited.
Okay.
It can be applied to, whatever the governing body
Okay.
wishes it to be applied to.
Chair, I want to clarify what you just said. The additional request at the beginning of this conversation was to take an action on the part of this body that would actually define what those could be used for. As it exists today, there is nothing else that these funds can be used for. You would need to take that action prior to being able to use that. That's why we want to come back with specific recommendations that this body could consider.
Okay.
Is that right?
So would it be best to entertain a motion to, to use it as you described?
Not at this point.
Not at this point?
No.
Okay.
No, I think it still needs a little bit of, these are still transient guest tax funds that can only be spent for
Tourism.
tourism.
So, well, let's see, that's what I was looking
Yeah.
for. So they are encumbered funds within a general bucket?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that probably needs to be developed, so I think a motion would be premature.
There's a statutory definition of what these funds can be applied to. It's a fairly broad definition.
Yes. It is in our charter ordinance, and it is fairly broad, but the bottom line is convention and tourism.
Okay.
Right.
So we can't use them to fill potholes, is what you're saying?
Correct, yeah.
That's what
Although that
everybody
would
keeps
help
asking me,
tourism.
just have to clarify.
Okay.
I have, if you want, I've got what those can be used for, if you'd like me to go through those.
Is
at
it a
this time.
list that you can read, or?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you just read the list
Okay.
of what we can use the transient guest tax fund for?
So number one, you can utilize it to contract with an agency to promote convention and tourism. Number two, you can provide for the operation, maintenance, and expansion of city facilities connected to convention and tourism. Number three, you can defray the cost of providing municipal services for convention and tourism activities. Number four, you can create innovative projects and activities for convention and tourism. And number five, you can utilize it to promote the general economic welfare of the city and its environs, including attracting industry. So fairly broad definition of what it can be utilized for.
Okay. Is there anyone here from the Soccer Association that would like to speak to this item on the agenda? Because I know we've had them before, so, okay. So with that, we'll move on to any other items currently before the committee. Is there anything else that we need to, I know, Brendan, I had an email about the deadlines that we need to get the allocation considered for the budget. When is that deadline? Do we need to meet again? Nikki?
So in that, I thought I'd provide another clarification. So the proposed budget will be sent to council by the second week of June. So if you haven't made a recommendation that goes back to the larger governing body before that date, then it will be a holding place in the budget, and they'll have to understand that maybe the committee hasn't officially signed off on it yet. Ideally, the committee would approve a proposed budget, and then that committee report would be going to council. Last year, it went around June 10th. So that was before the proposed budget went. That way, everybody just knew that the budget, what that was included in the proposed budget, matched what the committee reported to the rest of the council. That timing is ideal, but if it's not possible, then really you could recommend a budget at any point before the budget's stopped in August. So if it hasn't happened later, it can. It's just kind of an awkward timing, you know, then we're having a proposed budget. So I think ideally, if today you weren't ready to make a motion on the 2016 budget that's in front of you, then if you could meet again before that proposed budget would be finalized to be sent to council in mid-June, that would be ideal. Would you agree with? Not required, but ideal. That way everything is, and then also for the, I think the recipients to kind of know, the more clarity they have to plan ahead for their year, and the earlier they know, the better.
And just so I'm clear, this entire chunk of the budget is only funded by that one tax, correctly? There's no money that comes from like the mill levy or any of that sort of thing. It's all.
No, how this will translate into the budget is you'll see a transient guest tax fund proposed maximum expenditure authority. So bottom line, the budget that you're adopting, what's most important is this $2.7 million, and it's really just the transient guest tax fund.
Okay.
I'd say it does interact with other funds. So, you know, the general fund portion that was spoken a little bit about Visit Topeka, that we have a proposed number in here for the zoo. That number is reflected in our revenues in the general fund.
Okay.
And then the Historic Preservation Fund is another fund that you all have to set a budget for. So there are a few interactions that ideally you would know what all those dollars are when the whole budget comes together. Otherwise, you're making an assumption at that
So we
point.
can plug the framework into the budget and it'll hold. It just, some of the flesh out needs to get completed at some point.
Exactly.
Prior to those funds being
Yeah.
deployed.
And I did want to, I don't know if I wanted to make a clarification or a correction to this budget in case you did want to make a motion today. So the 1% allocation TBD at the bottom here, that number should actually be the same amount as the Sunflower Soccer because the 1% is the same for each. So it should be $383,890 instead of the $329,049 that you see. So it's good news. It's more money. And that would drop the contingency down to $7,423. So the bottom line that you see here is still the same, but it was allocated off the wrong percentage. So I just wanted to make that clarification. I'll send out a corrected budget, but I wanted you all to know as you're thinking about everyone's proposals and everybody else to know that it's actually that $383,000 is the number that we're projecting for 16. So apologies for that.
So you're saying the contingency fund then would be how much?
So the 1% would be $383,890, and contingency would be $7,423.
Okay,
So the bottom line is still the same, it's just that spread.
right. Okay. And the zeros that are from the transfers that go into 2016, if we determined to extend the 1%, could we put figures in those in that column? Because right now it shows that it ended 2015.
Yeah, you would just have to reduce it from that. Right now I've got it chunked together as the 383, so if you did want to specify that a certain number was going to these groups or different groups or the Historic Preservation Fund, then the 383 number would be reduced by that same amount. So it's got to add up to that 383.
Okay.
I think we should start at a more fundamental level. The communities that surround us are going to have a better competitive advantage than we do. And I think we need to decide, do we want to raise the tax to try and compete with them or not? I think that sets the foundation for everything else that goes on top of that. Because that's going to be critical to the whole rest of everything we decide.
With that said, I don't think we've heard from enough people to determine if we do want to raise it. So I wouldn't feel comfortable voting today to raise that.
Well, I agree completely, I would, but what I'm saying is we could spend a whole bunch of time on 1% and then realize that that's not enough to make our community viable in terms of competing in our state, and then everything we do past that is sort of moot.
So, Councilman Jensen, you're recommending possibly that we would meet again to discuss not only the reallocation of all the funds, but to increase the tax?
I would, yes, essentially. What I want to do is make sure that our community is competitive, and from what I'm hearing at this point, we are not competitive, and I just want to make sure that we are either okay not being competitive, or we have other assets that can compensate. Does that make sense? My concern, I mean, because we're talking about this is going to be around for quite a few years, and I don't want to set us up to fail right out of the gate.
Okay. Do you have any problems with that, Councilman Cole? So I think that's what, well, Kurt, you want to respond to that?
Not necessarily to that point. Obviously, if there's any consideration to increase it beyond 7%, the Topeka Lodging Association would like to
Absolutely.
have some opportunity
Yeah.
to digest that a little bit and come back with some thoughts. I did want to point out, though, with the change that Ms. Nikki made on the raising that 1% to 383,890, the 80%, 20% ratio that we have proposed, that means over a 7-year period of time, there would be about $2.15 million for acquisition, design, and development of a public plaza, and about $535,000 for historic preservation at that proposed level of splitting. So just wanted to point that out. I know you're all capable of doing that yourself.
Yeah, Brett, I'm sorry, that's your job.
Real quick, I just want to make a point as well that at this time, I'm not necessarily advocating that we increase the transit guest tax. What I am saying is that it is 7% right now. It's going to go down to 6%. We would like to keep it at the consistent 7%.
And I would agree at a minimum, we would want to keep it at
Yes,
that.
I was giving the numbers of Wichita and Kansas City as a comparison, not necessarily saying that I agree that it should go up to that percentage.
Can we be competitive with them at a lower level?
I think that for a city our size, I think that we have different things to offer comparable to what they have. So I don't know if I could answer that question, but what I could say is we would be a lot less competitive if we were to not extend that 1%.
Sure. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we're considering not extending that. I'm just concerned that it's not enough given the people around.
I think that's a whole nother situation that a lot of people would have to put some thought into about if that was to happen, what exactly that money would be used for.
Well, and so then the other question is then, given the time constraints we have, is it better to say, let's keep the 1% we have and then begin the discussion on raising that in the future, or should we just do it all now?
With the fact that we're under some deadlines, I think for the budget process, I think you're right in the assumption it would be better to just vote to extend it.
Okay.
And then determine if we want to increase it, because I think as Kurt and Brett have said, they would need to weigh in, and their
Right.
groups would need to discuss this, and more groups would need to
Okay.
discuss this. So, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any, Brandon?
Councilmember Short. Also, we have flexibility in the budget process, so the state allows budget amendments to occur. So if at any time the governing body chose to increase it, we could do an amendment at that time to make sure we have the maximum flexibility.
So my final question on the budget is, if we need to get this to the committee of the whole, or the council governing body, and we are starting the budget process this next couple of weeks. So what would be the best approach then to determining where the funds go? Because we heard from a lot of people today as to what they would like to see happen with these funds. And we have a budget document, proposed budget document, where we need to either accept this or discuss it as a committee to determine if this is what we're going to, recommend to the committee of the whole. So what's the process that we should adopt or proceed with?
I think Councilmember Schwartz, if we were to have another meeting in June, before we could work into the budget process, if there was proposal that was developed by one of the committee members, we could work with that and show how it would allocate within the budget development.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to recommend to this body that we schedule a meeting maybe the first week of June, the 3rd or 4th. Gives us an opportunity to clarify with the various parties who've expressed an interest, and then put you in a position where you can make a more informed decision.
That sounds good. Brendan?
Well, so at that point, then, should we move to extend the existing 1%? I don't think anyone is saying we shouldn't do that, and then have a second motion to look at, is that the correct competitive number for our community?
I don't know that we've had a public hearing on extending that, except for today. So as far as requirements, Mary, are we within, we've heard most of the conferees say that they want to extend it. So can we vote today to extend it?
You could make a motion to recommend to the governing body that the transient guest tax that expires in December of 15 be extended for an additional period of time.
Okay.
And I don't know whether you want to get involved in the details, 7
Madam-
years or, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I would suggest that we really hold any action until we can come back with a comprehensive approach. You're going to be finding yourself defending your actions prior to being able to provide any details in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, if there is no other business to come before the committee, then we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today.
You did such a hard time to get you guys to vote. Now you want to get ahead of me.